Hey, welcome to Ask Andrew. This is where I take your questions that come in during the week and I put my take on it. Hopefully you find some value. So let's just get right to it here. Okay, this is in from Ask Andrew. This comes from Sam. His question is, what is your take on accountability for growing knowledge in the workplace? And the question goes on to talk a little bit more about, if you gain knowledge, where does the growth come from, that kind of a thing. So we'll just take these one step at a time here. But accountability for growing knowledge in the workplace, I feel like that's your responsibility to continue to gain knowledge. And what I mean by that is, if you want to excel as a machinist, there's only one way of doing that, and that's to increase your own knowledge, and you have to capture that within the workplace, because there's no other place to really grab it. Not many people have their machines at home. I mean, you can gain some knowledge at home, but the accountability of growing your knowledge comes from within. If you love the industry and you love the trade, you're going to do whatever it takes to get your head in the game and figure it out. It comes from capturing your own experience at the same time as gaining knowledge from those around you. And his question also goes on, it says, after some basic knowledge on operating machines, using measuring equipment and running programs set up for an operator to successfully perform. After that, does the growth come from the higher-ups, old heads in the shop to pass down information? Does it come from learning from mistakes? Or is it on the operator to show their peers and higher-ups that they want to dive deeper into this field with more advanced concepts and applications? So there's a lot to digest here, but he's basically asking who's responsible for teaching new machinist type. And again, I go back to if you didn't go through some formal education, then you have to figure out how to capture that information. If you're a machine operator and you want to become a machinist, well, that takes a certain skill set. You have to be able to measure parts properly. You have to be able to know when a machine sounds different, the tool might be wearing. And this comes from a while of doing jobs and asking questions. If an engineer or a lead comes up to the machine and changes something because they hear it, they might be listening while they're doing their work and they hear the tone change in your machine, they're going to come up and make an adjustment. They might stop the machine and look at the part, and they might be looking at surface finish. They might pull the tool out and look at the tool. That's your cue, if you're new, to ask them, what are you doing? Ask questions, get engaged with them, because they're probably on task to keep the machine going, making sure that good parts are going out the door, and your responsibility obviously is to keep the machine running and make sure it doesn't crash and those kind of things. So if you're into the game and want to learn the trade, it's your job then to be accountable and learn as people are coming along. So the lead machinist or the engineer comes up, and whatever he's doing to the machine, making adjustments, going into the control and changing offsets or whatever it might be, that's your cue to say, hey, what are you doing here? Can you help me advance a little bit? And ask questions. And if they're good, they're going to give you tidbits along the way. They might not have enough time to give you the full story, but they might say, hey, the part changed by 0.2 or it changed by 1,000. I'm just correcting it in the tooling offsets. And then you say, okay, where is that? And you go to the page and you see how he changed it. Just be a student, watch what he's doing and ask questions. So beyond that, if you're more advanced and you're beyond an operator and you're able to make some adjustments in the control, and you're still, might be surface finish, might be struggling a little bit. You don't necessarily see it, but a veteran does. He can tell when there's a little bit of a chatter, or there might be a depth of cut notch in the tool. You don't have the ability yet to be able to recognize that. They do. They can see it from a distance, and they might come and say, hey, you need to change tool number 5. And so they might have the one already queued up and ready to go. It depends on the shop. But anyway, your job is to ask these questions and say, hey, why are you changing that tool? And he says, well, there's a depth of cut notch going on. Now we have to change it. And you look and he shows you where the line is on the part. Or the surface finish might be getting a drag finish if you're turning. It says, well, the edge, there's a built up on the edge, and you look at the edge of the insert and you see that, yeah, there's some built up there, and you peel that built up edge off and you can see that the insert is either wore or it's got a chip in it, right? So you learn these things along the way, and that comes from you being inquisitive and learning from, these little nuggets that you get from the veterans. This is the way we pass information back and forth when there's no formal education. Or even if there's formal education, still the trade schools can only teach you so much. They teach you the fundamentals. The rest of it is learned by doing, and the veterans have been there, especially the ones that are in their late stages of their career. Everything to them is done by intuition and having been there, done that, so many times they don't even think about the steps. You might ask them a question and they might answer it, but you have to ask why. And you might have to ask why 2 or 3 different times before you get to the simplicity of what they're talking about, because they can't a lot of times think in terms of very simplistic terms like they did when they first started, because that's how they learned. They learned from the veterans. That's how I learned. I learned from the veterans. I made tons of scrap, but I also owned the mistakes, but I wanted to learn from them so they wouldn't happen again. So is it on the operator to show their peers and higher-ups that they want to dive deeper into this field with more advanced concept and applications? Absolutely. When you're ready for more, I would say dive in and learn as much as you can. Find a mentor in the shop, one of the older guys that's willing to teach, but there's a way in doing that to where they will give you information if you're able to absorb it and apply it. If you ask them a question and then go and make the same mistake or do it your way, guess what? They're going to quit giving you information. So the best way to ask a veteran for help is to say, hey, could you teach me or could you show me how or why you do something a certain way? And then when they show you, say, why do you do it that way? And they're going to say, because I've learned that this is the best way to do it, because I've done it other ways and it doesn't work for me. And they might say, because if you don't do it this way, what happens is you open the door for, a mistake, or, they might say, I've learned that speed comes from accuracy. And so they want to make sure that everything that they do is accurate for the next step in the process, so on and so forth. But you have to continuously ask why to get to the root of the system that these veterans do. And so I believe that that's on each individual person to learn this stuff. And the trade will reward you. The more that you absorb, the more value you become, and the quicker you will learn. I believe that the more people you learn from, the more well-rounded education you will have, the more applications that you get exposed to, the more machinery you get exposed to, the different types of cutting operations you get exposed to, the more rounded you become and the more seasoned and the more valuable you become, because now you'll be able to recognize the same stuff that the veterans do. So that's my take on this question. I think that I answered the majority of it. I'll just read it one more time. After some basic knowledge in operating machines, using measuring equipment and running programs set up for an operator to successfully perform. After that, does the growth come from the higher ups and old heads in the shop? There's one missing component that I should mention here too, is keeping a log of what you're doing. You'll be surprised at how many times you might write down you're running a certain material with a certain cutting tool and you have similar issues, and suddenly a light bulb goes off and you're like, you know what, I think one time I ran this one a little bit faster and that issue went away, or one time I shortened my tool and that problem went away. Those are the kind of things that you start to learn on your own, but you have to write things down, keep a log of what you're doing so that you can go back and look at various things and see patterns and see things that you used to do and things that you do now, and you'll start to make your own corrections. But you have to write things down for yourself in order to be immensely successful in this trade. That's my take on it. Hopefully this answers the question, Sam. Stay tuned for more. Ask Andrew. So we have another question that came in to Ask Andrew, which is similar to the last one. And this one is from Noah. Noah says, what is the best information you can give a new machinist to make their life easier? I have some notes here that I'm going to refer to because this is a significantly broad question, but it allows me to get into the weeds a little bit more, maybe give some more information, because it's taking me back to when I first started in the trade and I was completely green. I came out of tech school as a mold maker. I had been through theory. I'd built one mold and I built one die. It's literally a 18-month crash course in machining, and then you get 9 months of finishing out the tool making side of it. And I remember coming into the shop the first time and helping the lead machinists or the veterans do like base work, which if you're a mold maker, you know what base work is, but I had to do the more of the easy stuff for an apprentice to do to understand how molds work and various things. So I'm going to go through this in a bullet form just to kind of relive how it was for me. And the thing that I did was I kept a notebook. I kept a log of different things that I was learning along the way. Things like fitting ejector pins and, just rudimentary things and water lines and quarter taps, water or pipe taps and things like that, just so that I could start learning the trade without having to ask always these what I considered, maybe rudimentary questions. But, I was lucky to work with some very talented mold makers that took me under their wing, helped me out. But the notebook was so good for me. I tried to find my notebook years later, and I remember the spiral binding, it was all smashed from being referred to for so many times. But that notebook, I think, just finally ended up getting discarded or lost somewhere along the way. What I kept in there was feed and speed information, and I kept log of my drills and the feed rates for the different drills, and I found a correlation there with the diameter to the feed rate. And that was how I developed some of my feed charts that later became part of the app that's on the website. I also kept track of the different materials that I was cutting and the challenges that I had. And I found out that I had to hone the edge on certain drills from time to time when I was drill reaming to stop them from chattering. There was a lot of different things that I learned along the way, from not only from the veterans, but from my own experience. So keeping a notebook is key. Read your chips. That's another item. So if you're cutting with today's technology, you're generally using carbide cutting tools that are coated, and knowing how to read the chip, what color it is and what the shape is, and if it's a jagged edge and various things like that. So learn how to read your chips. You will see when the machine sounds really good, open the door and look at the chips, and then just kind of write down what they look like, what color they are, the length, are they 6s and 9s, are they stringy, that kind of a thing. And you'll slowly start to see the patterns and write down the feed rate and the speed and the material so that you can next time get in that same ballpark again. You also want to know if it's steel or stainless steel, because in stainless steel you're going to see different colored chips than you will in steel. You'll see the edges on the chips will look different, so on and so forth. Yeah, and then in your programs, when you're running programs, use single block, especially if it's the first program out the door. If you wrote it, just go through it single block so that you can make sure that the program is going to run smoothly when you actually hit it, go to memory and hit cycle start without your finger on the single block button again. But run through a single block just so you can see how the tool, it's not going to crash, make sure you're not going to spike into the part, so on and so forth. So that's another thing that is run the first part a little bit slow. One thing that I did when I first started is I learned that every part is run twice. First of all, it's run in my head. I kind of know how it's going to run, and then it runs in the machine. So if you run it through your head first and you kind of know how it's going to run, then after that it runs in the machine. And if it runs in the machine kind of like it runs in your head, you'll be pretty successful at it. Another thing is make sure that you don't make multiple mistakes or make the same mistake multiple times. And there's one that I think comes up quite frequently, and that's chips underneath a part or under a fixture. People forget to blow it off or wipe it off. Cleanliness is a big part of this trade too when you're changing fixtures. So just make sure that your part locators are free and clear, and when you put parts in, you're loading them in the same fashion every time. Ask why. That's a very important one. Ask why. So if obviously new to the trade and you have the ability to interface with some of the veterans that are in the shop, ask why they do things a certain way. You'll see that they're very efficient at what they do. Their mind is always thinking, and they're trying to figure out how to improve a process. Even if a process is going well, a lot of these guys are trying to improve it so they can get more throughput or leave the doors shut more often. They might be tweaking the feed rate just a bit to get maybe another 10 minutes of tool life, or they might look at a part and say, hey, there's a little bit of chatter, and they figure out how to change it. But they're not going to say that stuff unless you ask why. So ask why, ask why, ask why. They might get sick of you asking why, but sometimes when you do that in an inquisitive way, they get more and more simplified, and you will learn a lot more by asking why than you will by just nodding your head and moving on. Because if you just nod your head, they're just going to feed you just a little morsel just to satisfy you. But if you ask why, you're showing that veteran that you're interested in learning. And if you ask why again, he's going to maybe stop and what he's doing, and he's actually going to explain things more in detail. So just ask why. Most of them are looking for somebody that cares, because a lot of veterans that I talk to today, they say, well, the younger crowd doesn't care. Well, I think that's not necessarily true. A lot of them are too timid to ask why. So again, ask why. Another one, learn the material before you cut it. Every material has certain nuances. Stainless steel likes to work harder. Steels like a little bit of edge prep, so on and so forth. So you want to know the material that you're cutting. Do a little bit of homework on the material that you're cutting so you know what the failure mode might be. There's so much information out there on various materials, and you can learn so much about the material before you actually apply a tool. You might, like stainless steel, for instance, it's very hungry. If you feed it light, you work hard in it, and then you just go through lots of tools. So you want to make sure that in certain materials, you're feeding it harder and spinning it slower. Steels like a little bit edge prep, so you don't want to use a stainless steel insert or end mill in steels because they will fail quick. Likewise, you don't want to use a tool made for steel in stainless steel and titanium and so on and so forth. So learn the materials. Here's a good one. Learn the difference between running a machine and machining. There's two distinct differences there. Anyone can run a machine, hit a start button. But the machining side of it is what's happening in the machine. What's happening in the cut? Is it chattering? Is it cutting smooth? What does it sound like? Are the chips coming off the drill in sixes and nines, or are they stringy? Are they balling up on the drill? That kind of a thing. So learn the machining process along with the machine. The machines have various nuances too, from one to the next. They might even be the same vintage of machine, but they have a little bit different nuance. So learn the machines and learn the machining. Okay, this is a good one. Get accurate before you get fast. When I first started in machining, I had a veteran tell me speed comes with accuracy. And I didn't really know what he meant by that because I figured really didn't even know what accuracy meant. But in the mold making process, there's parts that fit together. And in order for one part to fit, if you make them both accurate to the so-called to the print, they will fit without doing a lot of hand tooling. So accuracy makes you fast. Same thing in machining. If you're machining parts that have a certain tolerance, if you hit that tolerance and you make them accurate, you have a better window to use up your tolerance. So building the first one accurately and then allowing the tolerance to adjust, you'll be able to be a lot faster in making throughput. So speed comes with accuracy. That's a big lesson that I learned. So in closing, I would say that the thing that makes this industry maybe the most difficult is the knowledge that sits inside of your head. And in order to become a seasoned machinist, a lot of this information that you first of all write down starts to soak in your head, and it becomes intuitive, and you start doing things by experience rather than by referring to something. So learn the trade, learn from everybody else, write things down, pick up your own methodology, and then pass it on. That's what this trade is all about, is taking your knowledge and passing it on. You've learned it from somebody. Just be the guy that's the one to pay it forward and do it off. If you learn a trick, pass the trick along. If you have a trick, you learned it yourself, pass the trick along. And you'll find that this trade will reward you much better if you're proactive and very helpful and being just a steward of the trade. So I enjoyed this question. Thank you for asking it, Noah. Come back for more, but ask Andrew. It's on the MachinistX website. You can go there, refer to it, but ask the questions. I love these things, and I'm doing what I can to help the industry, and hopefully you're gaining some knowledge from this as well. So if you want your question answered, just go to MachinistX.com, go to the Ask Andrew page. You can also click in the description below the link, and just remember to subscribe and like this video, comment on it if you like it. I will see you next Friday.